We know that time is valuable, and everyone seems to be short on time these days. We wanted to be able to present the information from the Writing Revolution book, and then after spring break, dive right in to our curriculum mapping process. We're hoping that you can gather some ideas from the Writing Revolution book that we can all start to incorporate in our writing instruction. Judith Hochman is the author of the Writing Revolution book. She's a former head of the Windward School in White Plains, New York. It was an independent school focused on teaching students with dyslexia and language based learning disabilities. Students attended the school for 2 to 3 years for intervention, and then they returned to their public school. But upon completion of intervention, it was noted how well the students could write. Other school leaders took notice and started implementing her methods. The methods hurt no one, but it helped everyone. Natalie Wexler is the co author of this book. She's an education writer that is prominent in the news these days. She researches hot topics in education. She's also the author of The Knowledge Gap. This book focuses on the lack of content knowledge within the American education system. It's a rather meaty read, but if you enjoy nonfiction books about education and the education crisis in America, I would strongly recommend this book to anyone. When students' writing skills improve, their reading and comprehension skills also improve. They start to think like a writer and understand the structure of the passages. They can identify the parts of the sentences, and suddenly they don't seem nearly as complex. So, how can reading and writing strengthen your science and social studies content? I want you to keep this idea in mind as you learn more about the writing revolution. What would your year look like if you focused around the science and social studies topics rather than trying to squeeze them in when you can? This is a basic template of what I use when I start considering what my year is going to look like. It's nothing fancy. All I do is come up with 36 boxes representing the 36 weeks in a typical school year. Our school year seems to be a little bit shorter, and we average around 34 weeks if you don't count the week of fall break. I then start to take a look at what the science and social studies content looks like. What is in our standards? What topics can we lump together? And how can we base our reading and writing instruction around them? So let's take a look at a couple of the science standards that are in third grade, for example. So one of their science standards deals a lot with measurement and data. Well, maybe you could consider how inventors have created objects over the years and use those fiction but sort of nonfiction books to help explain them. So here are a few of those stories all about the inventors and what they created. So they look like fun and interesting picture books, but they do have some nonfiction components to it that explain the process. Over here, we have books all about force and motion. So we could talk about force and motion as it relates to sports because all of our students seem to love athletics. And if we could find ways to relate to their experiences outside of school, it might help keep them engaged. There's also a huge focus in the elementary grades about animals. So, one of them is people and their impact on the ocean. So, here are a few examples of books that involve people and how they saved animals, saved coral, created things that we use today, such as the submarine and the scuba tank, and how they save the ocean. These books down at the bottom are about animal adaptations. I have a fantastic writing project that we used to do in first grade. It just got to be a little too much. But these books tell you what your life would be like if you had various animal parts. So just kind of keep the idea of basing your reading and writing instruction around your science and social studies topics as we move forward. What would that look like? How could you squeeze in both more science and social studies and also more daily writing opportunities? The idea behind the writing revolution involves explicit instruction. Daily instruction in writing provides the necessary opportunities to improve fluency, and explicit instruction leaves less room for error. It sets clear expectations and it guides students with a gradual release of responsibility. So let's take a look at this through the evolution of Legos. Imagine if I gave you one of the original tubs of Legos and told you to build a house. These tubs of Legos didn't come with a ton of directions. They also didn't have a lot of colors or a lot of the specialty Lego pieces. It might look like any one of the following. This house up in the top left is complete, but it's lacking detail, style, and consistency. The house on the right, it looks like a house, but it isn't actually a house because it only has one wall. And then the house at the bottom left, it's on the right track, but it's unfinished. And the house on the right has a lot of great details, but it's kind of smaller than I imagined. The house on the left here has a lot of great details, but it's unfinished and it's kind of all over the place. And the house in the middle, the parts are there, but it needs to be expanded upon. And the house on the right, well, it has a strong foundation, but it's lacking details, style, and it needs to be expanded upon. This same concept applies to our students' writing pieces. We give them an assignment and they get close, but often miss the mark of what we were expecting. Lego took this to heart and realized as much as their customers wanted to be creative, they also needed direction in order to learn the techniques that the Lego engineers themselves were using. Their kits have evolved, including the details, the complexity, and the explicit directions. So, if you're not familiar with how Lego kits are now, they come in numbered bags with corresponding instruction booklets. And they show you exactly what your finished product for that bag will look like and how to begin. So, right here on these directions, it says you're going to open bag 4. This is what you're going to create by the end and let's get started. They don't just show you a picture of the person, they tell you exactly how to create the person. Once Lego customers master the techniques and understand how each individual piece can be used, they can create their own extravagant designs. But they had to explicitly learn each step along the way. If you ever visited the Oklahoma City Zoo this summer, you might have seen the brick designs that were along one of the paths through the zoo. And these are giant animals that were all built out of Legos. And this has been like a traveling exhibit around the country for the various zoos. Now let's talk about the mental load of writing. How do we take them from those unfinished, lack of detail houses to these extravagant Lego designs like we have seen at the zoo? Well, the mental load of writing involves strategizing. You have to select your topic and you have to know your audience. You have to initiate a series of actions in order to actually do the writing. You have to plan, you have to organize your ideas and your papers. You have to resist distractions. You have to sustain effort to actually complete the assignment. You need to self monitor along the way and institute needed changes through revisions and reorganizing your piece. Keep in mind, all of these tasks involve executive functioning skills. And our executive functioning skills can take up to 25 years to fully develop. Also, remember that our students with ADHD, ADD, or other various learning disabilities struggle with executive functioning skills to begin with. So, the mental load of writing seems almost unbearable. The writing revolution breaks down the writing process by focusing on sentences first and foremost. Sentences are the foundation of all writing pieces, and weak sentences equal weak essays. Students tend to use conversational English instead of formal English. This is especially true with many of our students texting and using social media. The main components of building great sentences happen by doing sentence level activities, sentence expansion, sentence combining, and using sentence frames. Sentence activities that are highlighted in the writing revolution include sentences versus fragments, scrambled sentences, the four sentence types, developing questions, using the conjunctions because, but, and so, using subordinating conjunctions and clauses such as although and unless, and using appositives. Sentences versus fragments is typically where we start. Can students identify the difference between a sentence and a fragment? When they're given a fragment, can they go ahead and turn it into a sentence? Something that goes hand in hand with this is the strategy called stoplighting your sentence. This is something we teach in first grade, and we use the idea that a stoplight, green means go and red means stop. So, as you can see on the sentence at the bottom, we take a green crayon or marker and we color our capital letter at the beginning to make sure that, yes, our sentence is ready to go. And then we color our punctuation at the end of the sentence in red. It tells us that that's the end of our great idea to pause, take a breath before moving on. This is a very basic strategy, but it's one that our students can pick up on and one that we can carry through multiple grade levels until it really does become second nature for our students to have a capital letter at the beginning and punctuation at the end. Because we know that our students struggle with this skill for several years. We can also use scrambled sentences. This is typically found in the lower grades, but it's more challenging than some realize, and it's equally beneficial in the upper grades. You decide the content, the number of sentences, and the method. So, are they going to unscramble it using their pencil, or are they going to do cut and paste? Here's an example at the lower level. You might give the students these words: the pig straw a house of first built. Notice how the word the is in bold. This tells the students that the is the first word of the sentence. That way there's no confusion. So, unscrambled, this sentence would say the first pig built a house of straw. An example in the upper grades would be something more content aligned. The branches government 3 has. If we unscramble it, it would say the government has 3 branches. So you can see how you can use this activity no matter what the grade level is, and it helps them put their thoughts in order because sometimes their thoughts truly are just jumbled in their brain to begin with. The next sentence-based activity includes the 4 sentence types: statements, questions, exclamations, and commands. Can students identify each of these sentence types, and then can they construct them? So the 4 basic sentence types are here. You can read these sentences and notice how they're each different. But that's because you've been doing this your entire life. And our students really struggle with identifying the various sentence types and then creating specific sentences based on those types. So, when it comes to creation, maybe you would tell the students, this is the type of sentence I want you to create, such as a statement, and your statement must involve the word tractor. Maybe this sentence type is a question, and it must include the word farmer. The third sentence you need to write needs to be an exclamation involving the word cow. And the fourth sentence type needs to be a command involving the word feed. So you can see how these 4 sentences all are revolving around rural communities or agriculture or farm life. And that is one of our topics in social studies. So the same thing can be true for the older grades. you can include your content-based vocabulary words and ask your students to come up with a sentence for each type. Identifying questions is a much easier skill for students than creating questions. Oftentimes, students have difficulty thinking of a question word to begin with. So, one strategy that you can do is create a word splash of question words and then give students sentence stems to get started. Here's an example of a word splash. It's nothing fancy, but it is something that you can draw on the board. You can just create a giant word cloud and have students offer up question words to help them get started. Oftentimes, when we ask students for a question, they automatically give us a statement. They have a really hard time producing questions. Picture prompts are a great way to get students engaged and get them thinking a little bit. Some of you saw the writing lesson that I did the other week, and it involved the prompts I see, I think, I wonder. So students were just kind of describing what they saw in the picture, but they had sentence stems to get them started. This is another activity where you provide the picture and you ask students to write two questions about this picture. So maybe you ask, what was this big cat chasing? Or maybe they would ask, is this cat going up the tree or down the tree? Then the next step is asking students to work back and forth between statements and questions. Students need to be able to take statements and turn them into questions, and take questions and turn them into statements. So if we gave them the question, did it rain yesterday? Then can they create a statement? It rained yesterday. Or if we give them this statement, I ate pizza for dinner, can they turn it into a question such as, did you eat pizza for dinner? The next step is taking these simple sentences and using conjunctions to create more expanded and thoughtful sentences. We start out with the conjunctions because, but, and so, and they're explicitly taught to the students. You need to explain the different reasons to use each word. So, because oftentimes offers an explanation, but indicates a change of direction, and so indicates a cause and effect relationship. Give students a sentence starter and have them complete the sentence using each conjunction. Here's an example for the lower grades. We had a snow day because we had a snow day, but we had a snow day, so. And then for the upper grades, maybe we can incorporate some social studies content. Abraham Lincoln was a great president because Abraham Lincoln was a great president, but, and Abraham Lincoln was a great president, so. Or what about the colonists settled at Jamestown because the colonists settled at Jamestown, but, or the colonists settled at Jamestown, so. So you can see here how the social studies content is working to our advantage, and we're getting to see just how much do they understand and how much do they remember about the social studies content. But in reality, our focus is also on the writing. We can also start introducing subordinating conjunctions. They're an introductory dependent clause, and they can be used as part of a sentence stem for your students to build off of. So here are some examples: before, after, if, when, even though, although, since, while, unless, and whenever. Oftentimes we think about subordinating conjunctions with the upper grades, but I think students, even in second grade, can start using sentence stems involving these subordinating conjunctions. It doesn't have to be complex. Just imagine them writing about before school, comma, and they finish the sentence. After school, comma, and they finish the sentence. So it doesn't have to be complex, but it does sound very complex. Just the name of subordinating conjunctions alone kind of seems a little scary to our students sometimes. But if we start introducing it into their writing, I think they can pick up on it pretty easily. So here's an example for the older grades before the American Revolution, after the American Revolution. But maybe the younger grades could talk about it this way. After emperor penguins build nests, if sea ice melts before the sea ice started melting, students can fill in the end of the sentence based on whatever they've learned about penguins. Our next topic is appositives. Appositives are an explanation phrase, and they can also be thought of as a second noun or phrase equivalent to the noun. You can start appositives typically around third grade. Oftentimes, students are developmentally ready for them any younger than third grade, but you can start out by just having students match a noun to an appositive. Then, when they're given a noun, can they create their own appositive? Or given a noun and an appositive, can they complete the sentence? And then they can start creating their own sentence using an appositive. Let's take a look. Here's an example of matching appositives. So on the left, you see our subject that we're starting with, the 4th of July, George Washington, the White House. And on the right, you have the appositive, that little describing phrase that relates to the noun. So the first US president, the home of the president, a patriotic holiday. In the next level of activity, you give them the subject of your sentence and you ask them to create the appositive. So we're using those same sentence stems for your example, but they're going to fill in their own appositive. And then the third level of using appositives would be giving them the subject and the appositive, and they have to put it together and then finish the sentence. What would you say about the subject in order to complete the sentence? Maybe you would say the White House, the home of the president, is located in Washington, D.C. So now all of a sudden they've got their subject, they've got a little bit of an explanation, they've finished the sentence, and now they've got a pretty great sentence that's giving a lot of detail and helping the reader understand a little bit better. Now we can really get into expanding sentences. Students tend to write simple, uninteresting sentences that barely explain their point. Question words help them expand their thoughts and add more details. Here are some examples of using question words. So we might use the question words who, what, where, when, and why. We teach students that the when question always goes first in your sentence. It helps alleviate some of the confusion as to where to place each part. The dotted lines indicate a phrase is expected, and the solid lines indicate a complete sentence is expected. That format carries through the entire writing revolution. We train students to see that whenever they notice a dotted line, they just have to write a short phrase or a word or two. And whenever they see a solid line, a complete sentence is expected. So here we gave them the sentence starter, the kids played. Then we asked students to fill in when. One spring day. Where? At the beach. Why? To celebrate the end of the school year. So students came up with these short little answers to these question words, and then they took all of that information and created one cohesive sentence. One spring day, the kids played at the beach to celebrate the end of the school year. Oftentimes, our students really struggle with taking their simple sentences and telling us any more. One strategy that we've used in first grade before is telling them that they must write at least 7 words. And 7 is kind of an arbitrary number. We just picked it. But when asked to meet a goal, they oftentimes go beyond the goal. And then they're super excited that they were able to do it. 7 doesn't seem that big of a deal once they start realizing that they actually just created a 10-word sentence. But it just gives an expectation for them and they know what they're working towards. Here's another one. Jane ran. When? The student chose at 7 a.m. Where? At the park. Why? to get in shape. And then they created the sentence at 7 in the morning, Jane ran in the park because she wanted to get in shape. Another sentence starter, if this might apply for the older kiddos, but it says the pyramids were built. When? In ancient times. Where? In Egypt. Why? To protect the body of the deceased pharaoh. And then they took all of that information that they learned about the pyramids and they created this sentence. In ancient times, pyramids were built in Egypt to protect the body of the deceased pharaoh. I don't want you to get the wrong idea about this because actually our kindergartners have done this in class. Just a few months ago, I went in and I saw that they had done a very similar activity to this, but they did it orally. So right now, our kindergartners are still trying to get all their thoughts in order and speak in clear and concise sentences. And so they did this activity with their teacher and they wrote it all out on chart paper and they were able to take their sentence stem. Maybe it was about a turkey because it was around Thanksgiving. And they talked about how the turkey was at the farm and that it was eating grain or whatever it was doing. But they took one word and turned it into this really great sentence. So this is an activity that applies even from our youngest writers at an oral level all the way up to our oldest writers because they're always working to create more detailed and robust sentences. Next, we start working on combining sentences. Here are a few examples. If we gave students these sample sentences and asked them to combine them all together, they'd have to really think and decide how can we combine it together without the sentence being too wordy. So Katie grabbed a seat, Sam grabbed a seat. The seats were adjoining, the seats were on the bus was crowded. So our students are asked to take all of this and then combine them to create a really great sentence, such as Katie and Sam grabbed adjoining seats on the crowded bus. Or what about Sam will finish shopping for the birthday party? He will shop this afternoon. He will shop at Target. This afternoon, Sam will finish shopping at Target for the birthday party. Oftentimes, our students are still creating these very short sentences that are basic and just don't have a lot of style and don't have a lot of meat to them. But if we can teach them, explicitly teach them how to take their three separate ideas and combine them into a more hearty sentence, automatically their paragraphs and their essays are going to start to sound more mature, more intelligent, and they're going to be more cohesive. The next step is teaching our students to restate the question in the answer. This helps focus the students, it keeps their thoughts on track, and can be practiced initially without the student actually answering the question. And it sets them up for success in the future. I'm sure if you think back to a variety of your classes, both in middle school, high school, in college, there were a lot of essays that you had to write and essay questions on your exams. And one way that you can stay focused and make sure your instructor knows that you are answering their question directly is by restating the question within the answer. So this might be the question, why was the Eiffel Tower built? And we teach our students to say, the Eiffel Tower was built, and then they finish it. Or when did the United States declare independence from Great Britain? The United States declared independence from Great Britain in. So automatically, we're teaching our students to provide a complete sentence when asked a question, whether that be orally or in writing. It's something we really strive to do when we're having our class discussions in first grade because they're still wanting to just give us a one-word answer. They just want to tell us the answer and move along, but we're encouraging them to really focus on those oral language skills because the stronger their oral language skills are, the stronger their writing can become. So we encourage our students with a sentence stem that they have to respond with. So, just to kind of recap, our activities for building sentences that we would love to see worked into your lesson plans if they aren't already include sentences versus fragments, scrambled sentences, the four sentence types, developing questions, using conjunctions because, but, and so, using subordinating conjunctions, using appositives, sentence expansion, combining sentences, restating the question in the answer. So, not all of these apply to all grade levels, such as the appositives we kind of talked about. That's more for third grade and up. But imagine the strength and the quality of our writing and the potential that it has if these skills are addressed in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, because every year their vocabulary is getting more in depth and they're able to just continue improving on their sentence work so that their paragraphs automatically become better. And then when their paragraphs become better, their essays become better too. When these skills just come naturally to them, they will become more fluent writers. Everything will just happen easier because right now, writing seems like a big struggle. That blank piece of paper in front of them can be pretty scary. And we have to keep in mind when students can write better, they can also read better because they understand the individual components of the sentences. The text appears less complex when they can break it down, just like the author did when writing it. The vocabulary in their reading passages that they come across is often complex, but so are the structures of the sentences themselves. Sometimes it takes a lot of effort to break down each part of the sentence to make sure they understand what the author was after. These are stepping stones. So, oftentimes, students are asked to jump from brainstorming to paragraph writing, and they need a stepping stone to help them visualize the structure and sequence of their paragraph. They need the opportunity to eliminate unnecessary or irrelevant details. And this is where the writing revolution included the single paragraph outline. The stronger their sentence skills are, the stronger their paragraphs will be. And the sentences are the foundation and structure of a solid paragraph. If we can explicitly teach the various ways to expand the sentences, then we can explicitly address the necessary revisions within a paragraph. So, what is a paragraph? Students need to be shown examples of a paragraph. Can they distinguish between examples and non examples? If you passed out six paragraphs. Some of them are true paragraphs and some of them are not. Maybe they're just sentences or just random phrases or just random sentences that aren't related to each other. Could they sort them into two piles? The true paragraphs and the non paragraphs. They also need to take a paragraph given by you and identify the parts of a paragraph. Can they find the topic sentence? Where are the three details? Where is the closing sentence? And then just the opposite. If you give them the individual parts, maybe on slips of paper, can they put it back together like a puzzle? Can they figure out which one of those sentences should be the topic sentence? Which ones are the details? Does it matter what order the details are in? And then which one's the closing sentence? These can all be individual lessons throughout your week. Working with this single paragraph outline format allows students to pick apart the structure of the text and learn note taking skills all at the same time. It also gives students the basic structure needed to form their paragraph. So here's an example of the single paragraph outline. At the top, you have TS for topic sentence, and notice the solid line. This tells the students that they are expected to write a complete sentence. Then, down the side, you see 3 to 4 details depending on how much you expect from your students. They can write short phrases on here in the order that they would like them to go. And then at the bottom, they have space for a closing sentence. Again, the solid line indicates it needs to be a complete sentence. Oftentimes, our students can get overwhelmed by all the different types of graphic organizers. There's nothing overtly wrong with any of the types of graphic organizers out there. Some people like Foursquare or Five Square. Some people like the hamburger. Some people like other random boxes on the page that make sense for that topic. However, there is something to be said for creating consistency within our grade levels so that students can use this. They can use an outline format to take notes in middle school and high school. Because really, who's going to teach them how to take notes? Oftentimes, they're going to walk into a classroom and the teacher's just going to start talking, or going to have the notes on the board and say, copy them down. When are we taking that opportunity to teach them how to write notes? So, this basic outline format sets them up for success. I understand there are many other methods for note taking, but if we can at least give them something to use as a go to method that is consistent and they become proficient and fluent at using, that can only benefit them in their writing. So we can use the outline format to teach them how to take notes. They can learn common note taking abbreviations, and they can start applying them throughout the week to various topics that you're covering in class. You can give students the opportunity to create an outline when given a passage to read. If you're reading a ReadWorks passage this week or a Studies Weekly article, have them practice breaking down one of the paragraphs into an outline format. Allow the students to see the relationship between paragraphs and outlines. Here's an example of a ReadWorks passage all about tigers. And then I created this outline off to the right. So I have my topic sentence: wild tigers could become extinct if people don't help them. And then I went ahead and broke down the two paragraphs into their own mini outline sections. So we have the first paragraph is about threats, and I listed the two threats that are happening to tigers. And then the bottom paragraph is about how we can save tigers, and it talks about 3 different ways that we can work with people to start saving the wild tiger population. So here you are, you're working on the science topic of animals. You are working on reading because this is a grade level text. And now you're working on writing and learning how to take notes. So you can use this single paragraph outline format without actually having your students turn it back into a paragraph, or the multi paragraph outline turning it into an essay. There is value in just creating the outline. It really helps students see the structure and the flow of a text. So we can break the job down into small pieces. And when given 2 sentences, ask students to choose between the topic sentence and the supporting detail. We can also give students sample sentences and have them choose the best topic sentence for a given paragraph. So here's example 1. These are the 2 sentences that we gave them. Thanksgiving is a popular American holiday. Our meal is very traditional. We asked the students which one should be the topic sentence. They have to learn to distinguish what a topic sentence looks like and sounds like versus a supporting detail. The second example is over here. Harriet Tubman helped slaves to freedom. John Brown led a small rebellion against slavery. The anti slavery movement began to grow in the 1850s. Abraham Lincoln won the presidential election. So, which one of these sentences would be the topic sentence, and which ones would be the supporting details? Again, we're minimizing the workload so that they master the art of identifying the topic sentence. Now we need to work on creating a strong topic sentence. So maybe we give them a specific type of sentence to use to create a topic sentence when given details. We tell them, here's your details. I want you to create a topic sentence that's a statement. Maybe I want you to create a topic sentence that's a question. I want you to use an appositive in your topic sentence. I want you to use a subordinating conjunction in your topic sentence. By being very explicit and direct, they at least have something to go off of, because again, that blank line on the paper seems to trip them up every time. But if we've explicitly taught them how to do each one of those 4 types of sentences and we've given them the topic. Now their sole focus is on taking those 2 puzzle pieces and creating the best topic sentence that they can. So, which details go with which topic sentence? Well, here's some details that we provided: cumulonimbus clouds, wind, rain, and hail, lightning and thunder, and the dog is under the bed. How can they take those details and create a topic sentence? Maybe then you want them to start working on making their topic sentences stronger. Maybe we give them Thanksgiving is fun. Well, what else could we say? Thanksgiving is a great family holiday. Thanksgiving, a popular holiday in the United States, is always celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November. Although all Americans celebrate Thanksgiving, not everyone knows why. So there's your basic sentence stem, and then those are 3 examples of topic sentences that students created. So imagine if you had everyone in the class working on this. You could get a lot of great ideas, all for the same topic. Once they've mastered the art of creating the topic sentence, then it's time to move on to the supporting details. When given a topic sentence, students can choose from a list of supporting details and decide which ones match the topic sentence. And when given a topic sentence, students can write the supporting details. And then, when given a topic sentence or a paragraph, students can eliminate unnecessary or irrelevant details. So, again, we're being very explicit and intentional about moving that gradual release of responsibility each time in order for them to master the art of creating supporting details. Here's an example of topic sentence 1 and 2, and then supporting details over to the right. So, topic sentence 1 that we gave them is George Washington, the first president of the United States, had a remarkable life. Topic sentence number 2, although Abraham Lincoln came from humble beginnings, he became one of the greatest American presidents. So now students have to sort through the supporting details over here and decide which paragraph do they match up with. So here we are reinforcing the social studies content, but actually working on writing skills. Then, what about deconstructing a paragraph? When given a paragraph, practice deconstructing it using the single paragraph outline template. Can they identify each piece of the paragraph? Here we have a paragraph that was teacher created, and then the students had to work to develop the single paragraph outline. So I have a routine when I do my homework. First, I start my first page of homework. Next, I get a drink of iced tea. Then I get rid of my brother Nicky because he comes into my room. Finally, I try to do my homework in peace, and over the years, this routine has worked very well for me. On the single paragraph outline, students break it apart, identify the topic sentence, identify the 4 details in the order that they were given in, and then they indicate the closing sentence at the end. What if you give students a topic sentence? Can they create the supporting details? Have students use an article to create a summary paragraph, maybe. This provides them with all the information they need right in front of them without the stress of having to create their own details from memory. Here's an example of a teacher given topic sentence. The autumn season brings many changes. The students gave all of these supporting detail ideas, but then they had to individually create the single paragraph outline over here. So they have the topic sentence, but they need to go ahead and combine these great ideas together into just 4 ideas and then create the closing sentence at the bottom. So they decided to say turning back clocks, shorter days, and longer nights because all of those things had to do with time. The colder weather because of frost, they wore sweaters and jackets. So it's talking about the temperature. The leaves turn colors and they fall. So it's talking about the plants in autumn. And then animals make shelter, and they need to give an example of an animal that makes a shelter. So each detail was its own category almost, but they had to combine all of the ideas together and whittle out the ones that they didn't need. Here are the single paragraph outlines that are provided within the Writing Revolution. These are in the book and they're also on the website. I'm going to be creating a resource folder that has all of these templates in there. It's obviously something that you can make on your own, but I think it's a really nice structure that if we could consistently use throughout the grade levels, it would really help our students. They also have templates for creating a sentence summary of a book or a longer article. And then they have this combined outline where it's a sentence summary, but then we're giving like more details about it and creating that closing sentence. So now that they've mastered the art of creating that outline, now it's time to write your first paragraph. They need to be able to identify the topic, the purpose, and the audience that they're writing for. They need to brainstorm and relate to the details that they're going to be writing about. They need to generate a complete topic sentence, select category, categorize, and sequence the details, and write notes for the detail sentences on the dotted lines. And then they generate a complete concluding sentence. Remember, though, we've been explicitly working on each one of these steps this entire time. Once they've written a paragraph, now we need to start talking about guided revision. Revising their own writing is very challenging for students at our age level. They think that they've put all their effort in, that they've done a really great job. So the idea of having to go back and change it just does not appeal to them. But what if you give students a paragraph that you created and have them practice making specific revisions? Now it's less personal. It doesn't seem like a personal attack on their hard work. Now you're providing the paragraph, but you're teaching them how to start going back and making changes. Eventually, you'll want them to be revising their own writing and working with a partner to revise their peers' writing. But for right now, let's just teach them the art of revision and then go back. So maybe for this paragraph, you specifically tell them add an appositive to the topic sentence. Expand the second sentence answering the question when. Add transition words to sentences 2 and 3. So, yes, we are telling them exactly what to do, but we're not really telling them why to do that. In the past, I've heard some of our teachers mention how when they're trying to edit an essay or grade an essay for a student, they end up ultimately telling them exactly what they should have written to begin with. And not only is it time consuming, but they don't really feel like the students have an opportunity to learn from this. But they're trying so hard to get their point across so that the student understands what the expectation is. But by using this guided revision practice, the same thing can be applied. When a student turns in an essay and you're making those initial suggestions for them, you can use more of a generic term such as add an appositive to the topic sentence. You're not telling them what the appositive should say, but you're telling them what the structure of the sentence needs to be. We're setting them up to practice the specific skills that you want them to work on. So if you notice that your students are struggling with creating appositives or using transition words, you can set up the paragraph so that they ultimately have to work on that. It also helps you as the teacher work on your revision language when grading. So, by creating these generic statements that the students can recognize, you can eliminate the battle of the back and forth and the hours upon hours of grading because you're trying to write every little detail. But by using these short phrases, it puts the work on the students because ultimately they're the ones that need to be doing this amount of work. It's the only way that they're going to get better. After revising comes editing. But oftentimes teachers kind of combine revising and editing when in reality they're two very different skills. Revising involves the structure, language, or syntax of a sentence, but editing involves the grammar, the spelling, and the punctuation of the sentence. Students can practice editing in isolation through daily sentences. This used to be popular with the daily oral language program. The teacher can be intentional with what sentences they provide their students so that they can work on specific skills. The COPS acronym can be written to the side of any assignment and help students remember what to look for in their writing. COPS stands for capitalization, overall appearance, such as spacing, handwriting, etc., punctuation, and spelling. Now we need to start talking about, well, what are the different types of writing that our students should be experiencing throughout the year? The first type of writing that we want to talk about is narrative. This can be a personal narrative, a content based narrative, or a fictional narrative. They tend to be lengthier pieces just because you really have to develop that plot. And they're often difficult for students to create because of the need for creativity. It's easier for students to write about things that they know rather than creating something imaginary. Expository writing is the most common type of writing across science, social studies, and English classes. The majority of our instructional time should be focused on this type of writing. Think about your high school essay tests and college classes. Rarely did you have to write a creative writing piece, unless you were a writing major. The compare and contrast is another type of expository writing, but it can be especially difficult for students to organize. They need explicit instruction in this type of writing. Again, this is where you would show them examples of a compare and contrast essay, practice writing one together, then ask them to come up with just the outline of what it would look like. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And then, once they're experts at all of those steps, then have them jump into actually writing a compare and contrast essay from start to finish. But keep in mind, there is a ton of value in just creating the outline for the essay. And there's process writing. It's often called how to writing, and it's popular in the lower grades, but equally as important in the upper grades. It focuses on using transition words, it's a clear sequence of events, and explicit language and vocabulary is required. Descriptive writing uses the five senses and requires a strong understanding of adjectives, synonyms, directional prepositions such as below, next to, etc. And then we have opinion and argumentative. The major types involve stating your opinion, persuading someone, and then an argumentative essay. Why is one thing better than another? Argumentative essays are considered the most complex, and in 2012, only 25% of students' argumentative essays were considered competent on the National Writing Test. So it's more common at the middle school and high school levels for sure. At the elementary level, our focus can be on clearly stating our opinion and supporting it with relevant details. Quality class discussions and oral arguments will have a huge impact on the success of your students' writing pieces. You can spend several days just practicing orally arguing a point or an opinion or discussing what the options are before you ever pick up a pen or pencil. Once students are experts at creating the paragraph, that's when they're ready to start moving into the multi paragraph papers. The Writing Revolution provides sample outlines. Here's the transition outline that's available. It's kind of a nice stepping stone from the single paragraph outline to the multi paragraph outline because the students can clearly see their two paragraphs or on the right, their three paragraphs and what they look like. But then we move into that multi paragraph outline. So they would include the main idea on the left and then the details on the right. So it has a little bit less structure than the transitional outline. It's for those more mature students that are ready to move on and have it set up a little bit less for them. You can also use the multi-paragraph outline when it's set up like this for a book report. So you can introduce the book, you can write a mini summary of the book, and then give your opinion of the book. Who would like to read it and why? They also have the outline if you're trying to write 4 paragraphs or 5 paragraphs. So they use the same basic format. It's just it evolves as the maturity of the students evolve. So again, we're kind of circling back to how can reading and writing strengthen your science and social studies content? What would your year look like if you focused around the science and social studies topics rather than trying to squeeze them in when you can? Pages such as these and a few other graphic organizers that I've created that are even more detailed will be available when we have our next curriculum mapping meeting. We want to start taking a look at our topics, what they might include. What are some of your writing projects that you already cover that you want to make sure remain? And how can we add in these other activities around them? So, the Writing Revolution provides a sample curriculum map for third grade and a second one for 7th through 12th grade, with the idea that the other grade levels that aren't covered can kind of create their curriculum maps around the third grade one that's provided or around the 7th through 12th grade one that's provided. Third grade is kind of that nice middle of the road where you can easily talk about first and second grade or talk about fourth and fifth grade on the opposite side. So I have created the outline, the curriculum map, so that you can kind of see how it flows. I have one that is based on the one in the book. And then I went ahead and for each grade level, I listed out the explicit skills that we would like to see included in our writing, and you have a line off to the side where you can write down the week that you think it might be beneficial to cover it. One thing that the Writing Revolution did in their curriculum map, we'll talk about it when we meet, but they made sure that these activities cycled throughout the year. So it was repetitive, but the demand increased every time. So, for example, with appositives, maybe at the beginning of the year, the first 9 weeks, students were introduced to appositives, but they were just matching them. Maybe then in the second 9 weeks, students had to create create an appositive based on the sentence stem that was provided. Maybe in the third 9 weeks, they're creating full sentences using the appositive. So every time they're asking the students to do a little bit more of the work, but they're always coming back to make sure that the students are strong at writing sentences which include appositives. So, like I said, you guys are going to have access to the sample curriculum map that the Writing Revolution gave, but you're also going to be able to take a look at the skills that are mentioned in the book and try and decide, well, where could we fit this in? And for example, if you're working on grammar those first 9 weeks, like I know many of our grades do, what if grammar only took about 15 minutes and then that still left you 15 minutes to really work on that sentence development or to really work on learning how to create an outline based on the passage that you're already reading in class? So it's a matter of just making sure our students have enough opportunities to write throughout the year. I also went ahead and created this kind of checklist for the various writing pieces. So you can kind of start to plan out, okay, when are we going to write our narrative? How long is it going to take? You can write in the weeks or check off, yes, we already do these things and this is when we do them. So I've tried to create graphic organizers for you to help you jump into it and really get started on mapping out your year and making sure that we're set up for success and we're ready to kind of hit the ground running the next time we meet. I went ahead through the standards and tried to come up with all of the grammar topics that were mentioned in our standards, along with blank lines for you to be able to write in your own, because sometimes you guys cover a few extra ones, which is always great, but they aren't listed in our standards. So we just want to make sure that we get them organized into your year as well. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for trying out this method of meeting and listening to the Writing Revolution so that hopefully we're ready to get going when we come back from spring break. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email me. And like I said, I'm going to start producing a folder full of activities and resources from the Writing Revolution that might interest you. Thanks.